What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel for a very exciting episode this week. We are finally getting the 8 HP mounted onto the Honda K24 in our Subaru BRZ. Stick around, it's gonna be a good one. So just a couple of things to sort of clear up really quick. In the last episode, we did a lot of cutting on the outside of the transmission case. We did some hammering underneath the tunnel, and I got the transmission up into place and basically touching the adapter plate on the back of the engine. And I was saying like, yep, this thing's gonna fit, no problems, we're good to go. Well, as you know, I went on vacation, went to California for a long weekend, got back and started sort of messing around with it again. And I realized there were a couple more things that needed to be done before it was gonna be like truly perfect, ready to go. The first of those being that the starter motor, as it, basically sticks through the back of the engine so that it can access the teeth on the flywheel, the head on the starter motor where the gear actually protrudes out, the tip of that extends past the edge of the adapter plate, and I wasn't exactly sure if the 8 HP bell housing was going to clear that. If you recall, when I originally put the CD009 transmission in this car, I had to cut sort of the inside radius of the bell housing to make it clear for that starter. So same kind of deal. But the way that the bell housing in the 8 HP is designed, slightly different from underneath, from up top, from the side of the car. I couldn't exactly tell if it was going to clear without having to cut it. So I did go in and sort of just notch back a little bit of it. I'll try to put some video in here of kind of what it looks like. And I also realized that the AN lines that I will need to run my transmission cooler were not going to clear because of the side of the tunnel underneath. So, took the 8 HP out. I cut out that slot for the bell housing to clear the starter. And I think I cut off another tab on the side of the transmission and hammered back the tunnel a little bit more just to make sure that we were going to have enough room for clearance and such of the accessory items that will attach to the side of the 8 HP. I'm only going to talk about this for another like 30 seconds, and then we'll get into getting the flywheel installed, finishing installing the adapter, and then hopefully, as long as everything goes smoothly, getting the actual transmission bolted onto the back of the engine. I'm going to jump in here really quick and remind you guys that this phase of the build is sponsored by SeemsLegitGarage. SeemsLegit is the premier provider for all of the 8 HP swap parts that you would need for your build. Whether you need an adapter plate and flywheel package, a transmission mount, if you need fittings for the transmission oil cooler, if you need anything even up to a parking brake release, they have everything that you could possibly need to put an 8 HP behind the engine in your car. They also have their own social media pages where they do their own builds. They race in grid life. They also do video tutorials for installs of some of the most common parts for the 8 HP swap. So if you're interested in checking out any of the parts that you've seen on my build, or if you want to check out something for the 8 HP for your car, then head on over to SeemsLegitGarage.com. Thanks again to SeemsLegitGarage. Now let's get back to the video. This guy, see how that kind of sticks out from the side on the passenger side a little bit? It was, just barely slightly, touching the inside of the tunnel. So I wanted to go ahead and clear that. So, I didn't cut it all the way back that I could have. I could have grinded this all the way to follow the shape of the bell housing here, but I cut it back a little bit, and we're gonna hope that that's good enough. I have my -10 AN lines from SeemsLegitGarage attached on here, and there is one other piece that goes all the way down here on the bottom. This right here, this little threaded sort of flat tab, is for the parking release. So basically when the engine is in the car and it's all done, and when the car is off and it's in park and I ever need to, move it around the paddock when I'm at an event or move it around the garage or anything like that, normally there's a little tab. I did something with the stock one, can't remember. But basically, by rotating this, it actually disengages the park lock. And so SeemsLegit makes a custom piece that attaches to this and runs a line so that you can actually run it to the inside of the car so you can pull that latch release and basically take this thing out of park. This right here is the cut that I made to clear the starter. So you can see we have these top 2 bolts, and it's this section between whatever that is, 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock, So you can see I just kind of notched it back a little bit. I grinded it smooth, and while I was doing this, I had I had this whole thing bagged up and taped, sealed, while I was cutting this and sanding it and making sure that it was nice and smooth, just because we don't want to get any metal particulate back in here behind the torque converter or inside of the transmission or anything like that. Sorry for being long-winded, but anyway, 8 HP should be pretty much ready to go into the car. So let's jump underneath. I'll show you guys the tunnel, and then we will jump into the flywheel first. So previously on the tunnel, if you guys remember, we had this little sort of dome shape, almost kind of like mushroom top thing going on here. We had already hammered that back, but I decided to give it an extra couple of whacks, and then everything on the inside of the tunnel right here that's all taped, which I need to see if I can scrape all that off, or I might just leave it because nobody's ever gonna see it and I don't really care all that much. So you can kind of see how this whole thing is dented in pretty good. I don't know if that's really gonna come across on camera, but basically from where this is to this is a good, I don't know, 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch more pressed in just from all the hammering that I did. So that sort of wraps up the tunnel modification. So let's go ahead, we'll jump into the flywheel, finish doing the adapter plate, and then see if, the 8 HP actually fits into here with the tunnel modifications that I've made. And 15.2. All right, so we're torqued down to all 3 of the torque levels that were provided with the instructions. So flywheel is on. So now that the flywheel is done, I actually need to finish doing the adapter plate. I never fully secured it or torqued it down. I pretty much just put a few of the bolts in just to hold it, flush with the back of the engine block and secure to hold it in place, basically just for test fitting purposes, but now I need to actually finish installing it. So we've got 4 of the bolts in there. I'll show you guys those in just a second. The Adamat adapter kit from SeemsLegit comes with all of the bolts you need. All of the bolts that I just put in the flywheel were provided with the kit. All of the bolts for the adapter plate are all provided with the kit, etc. So I have 4 of the standard size 10 hex bolts in place, and there's only 3 other ones that I need to do. One of those being this guy. This is actually for the starter motor. It goes on the starter inside of the engine bay and goes in through the back of the adapter plate. You can see the starter motor here, and we have that hole at the bottom right there. That is where this bolt is going to go into, and honestly I don't know if the head of this is going to be wide enough to actually not go, just end up through the bottom, just pulling through that. It doesn't look like it. It's pretty close to being the same size, but it doesn't go through. So that means we can go ahead and get this guy in here. Sorry that the light is so poor. It's on my head. I'm trying to look at the camera and in the engine bay at the same time. And get that. They don't give any torque specs for any of the bolts on the adapter plate, so we're gonna go with the German torque spec, which is good and tight. All right, so the starter bolts went in right up here. It's a small little M10 hole. You can just barely kind of start to see the back of it. But on the back of the Honda engines, there are two like round dowel pins. There we go. So you can kind of see how that hole sort of bottoms out on the back side. And the same thing right here. Yeah, but so this side, it actually doesn't bottom out. That is a through hole. The last two pieces of hardware are going to be this one, where this dowel pin sort of alignment is on this, as well as this hole right here. So these are both through holes. So for the one starter bolt, the lower one, obviously here's a starter motor. This is where that starter bolt went through. It's a little M10 bolt. So we still have one of these size 10 hex bolts, and we have 3 still up at the top. So I still need to go through and do those 4 bolts, but the last 2 are actually going to be complete through bolts. So what that means is that they're going to go through one side and out the other. So they're just going to need a bolt and a nut and a washer on the end. And same thing for here. So the first one is this guy, and it is actually one of the locations for the like sort of alignment dowel pins that are on the Honda K24 block. And then the other one is this one right down here. So the hardware for that is these guys. So it's I believe it's a size 8 on the back, and I don't know, what looks like a 17 or so on this side. So we're gonna go through and get everything else tightened down nice and secure. All right, cool. 1, 2, 3, 4, starter bolt. Now we just do these 2 through bolts. I believe that's gonna be a size 8, not a size 10. And I can confirm that that is a 17 mil nut on the end. These 2 bolts are probably way longer than they really need to be, but you know, better safe than sorry, I guess. All right, cool. All right, adapter plate is fully mounted up, I believe. All right, one thing that I have not done yet is basically where the torque converter is going to be able to make contact is actually another little piece that goes on top of this. That's what these 4 bolt holes are for. So let me grab that real quick, get those, and I think it's only like 10 Newton meters, which is something like 6 foot-pounds or something. And so this is the piece that I'm talking about. I don't know what these 2 small little bolt holes are for. This one right here at the top, and then this one, but I do know the 4 larger bolt holes go to these guys. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And now that we've got the flywheel all torqued down, these flywheel bolts underneath do sit flush. So this guy is gonna go right about there-ish. Let me grab the bolts, and we'll use a little bit of blue Loctite on these bolts because we're not going to be able to tighten them down a whole lot in terms of torque. So the Loctite is going to help keep that thing in place. All right, there we go. We're going to call that good. So now that we've got that on, we've got the adapter plate, everything's tight, we've got the flywheel on, we have all of our fittings on the transmission. The only thing to do at this point is to bolt the transmission onto the back of the K24. Well, the 8 HP is in. There's a couple of places where it's really super close fitment, specifically on those -10 AN fittings for the transmission cooler lines. So we're gonna go ahead and take a look at those really quick. I do want to point out that what made this a lot easier was putting a jack underneath the harmonic balancer and actually tilting the engine, the backside of the engine, down in the engine bay. So basically what I did was I had my my regular old floor jack with a bunch of blocks of wood, and I set it right underneath my ATI harmonic damper, my little super damper here. And when I was, jacking, when I was pulling or pushing on the floor jack, it was pushing this upwards, which in turn was tilting the engine back, right? And so that was helping sort of bridge the gap between the adapter plate on the back and the 8 HP itself. We are all flush. I have not done the torque converter bolts, but that should be simple enough. There's 6 torque converter bolts that will go in through the holes on the backside of this. The sway bar might be kind of in the way, but I think we should be able to make that work. 2 bolts at the bottom. We've got a bunch along the sides. There is 1 bolt hole all the way at the very top that I am going to leave the bolt out of. It's just not worth it. If I was gonna put the CD009 back in here, I would not be putting the top 1 or maybe even 2 bolts back in the CD009. Just not necessary. It just kind of really gets in the way more than anything. Makes your job removing the transmission a lot harder. So if for whatever reason I ever have to take this thing back out, I just don't want to have to do it. And all of the hardware that's supplied with this are all internal hex. So it's not like, I can use a swivel socket and a really long extension bar and get it up there. I'd have to use like an 8 mil or an H8 size hex bit and use that on like a swivel extension piece and then go all the way over and try and get it just in the right. I'm not doing all that. I'm just not. We've got all of the bolts on the bell housing. I do want to show you guys the transmission mount. That's probably going to be next video. I don't exactly know like how I want to do this like perfectly yet, but we'll get around to that. But I do want to show you guys. As you can see, these are all of the marks from where I was, hammering the tunnel back for the CD. So considering this is the end where the, the actual output flange for the CD was probably way back here. So this transmission is a good bit shorter front to back. So my drive shaft is going to need to be longer. Anyway, so this right here is the HPR transmission cross member for GT86 BRZ FRS. So as you can see, it goes all the way up. It is on some rubber bushings, right? So we've got some vibration damping capability going on there. Now, the way that I need to drill the holes for this is going to be a little tricky, or I may need to actually put some spacers in between the mounting bolts that are back here. There's 4 mount bolts, there's 2 there, and there's 2, 1 here, 1 there. Either way, there's 4 bolts. But I may need to put some spacers in between those, because where you can kind of see, so this is literally just a flat piece of billet, but the tunnel goes from flat here and it actually starts to sort of incline. So you can see that there's a bit of a gap on this front side right here. You can kind of see my finger sort of coming through there, and that happens on both sides. So the slots for the bolt holes are going to line up really well. But the only problem is it may be a little bit too far forward at the moment, so I need to space the entire mount back towards me a little bit. But just kind of wanted to showcase, what the transmission cross member looks like, and with that, the 8 HP is actually going to sit up higher in the tunnel than the CD009 did, which also kind of means I'm probably going to need to reconsider how my exhaust is run. I might go to some oval tubing and actually use this channel right here somehow. I don't really know. And the last thing that we need to do to get this 8 HP fully on the engine is bolt in the torque converter. Now there are 6 bolts in total. It is 3 pairs. So there's 2, 2, and 2 in terms of the layout of where the torque converter bolts go on the flywheel. The question that I had was, how in the world do I get the holes on the flywheel to line up with the holes on the torque converter? I was pretty confused, not really sure how I was going to manage that. So I tried taking the starter motor off from underneath the intake manifold, and that didn't really help me at all. What I ended up doing was actually kind of neat. Realized that I still had my tiny little bore scope that I bought on Amazon, because I had bought it when I first got the K24 so that I could put it down in the cylinders to look at the condition of the tops of the pistons. And it's just been sitting in a box ever since. So I hooked it up to my phone. I basically put it on one of the holes on the flywheel, and I have, you know, a big wrench on the crankshaft pulley bolt right at the front. And I basically was just sort of bumping it along, and I was holding the bore scope, tiny little camera, up against the hole on the flywheel until it finally lined up with a threaded hole. And then I checked, because again, the holes are in pairs on 3 different spots. So once I had lined it up with one, I checked the other one to make sure that both of them were lined up with threaded holes, and booyah, there you go. So once I put 2 bolts in each of those, then I could actually move. When I moved the crankshaft, I was actually moving both the flywheel and the torque converter. So that's kind of how I figured out how to sort of line them up. Obviously not like ideal, but it worked for me. Kind of easiest way that I really could sort of come up with on how to line up the holes on the flywheel and the holes on the torque converter. So now what we need to do is go around, put a little bit of the directions from Adamat, the company that makes the adapter. Says to use soft thread locker. So I take that to mean use thread lock blue. And it says it's 79 Newton meters, which is 58 foot-pounds. There's not a whole lot of room underneath the car for me to get a big torque wrench on these small little bolts. So we're gonna see what we can come up with. It might just be, again, German torque spec, Guten tight, give it a couple of whacks, and with the thread lock on there, or the Loctite on there, just kind of call that good. I'm thinking that's kind of where I'm gonna end up. Do I recommend doing this? No, I always recommend torquing to spec, but it's a little tight under here. The sway bar is the real thing that's kind of getting in the way of actually like being able to torque these bolts down properly, but I'm not about to pull the sway bar out to do this. So anyway, let's get it. Well, that should pretty much wrap it up. Adapter plates on, flywheels on, transmission mounted to the adapter plate, and now torque converter mounted to the flywheel. So, sorry, the light's kind of a little bright under here. So now, all we gotta do is the trans mount, which I think we're going to save for the next episode because it's gonna be a little bit tricky, and I wanna get this video out this week so that you guys aren't waiting a whole nother week or 2 for me to figure out how to do the trans mount and then not have a video in between. So we're gonna go ahead and end it right here. So now we have the 8HP70 fully mounted up behind the Honda K24. Like I was saying a second ago, the only thing that we have left to do really is the transmission mount, which might be a little bit tricky, so we are gonna save that for the next video. I wanna thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate all the support that you guys have given me over the lifetime of the channel, as well as this phase of the build. I can't wait for it to be done. I'm really looking forward to driving this thing, but we do have quite a lot of work left to do. So if you guys wanna stick around for that, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel so that you can stay up to date. If you wanna pick up any of the merch for Downshift Racing, head on over to downshiftracing.co, pick up hats, shirts, hoodies, sticker packs, anything like that. Head over there, get what you need, and until next time, build your dreams.